Welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel. My name is Florio, and today's video we're going to be doing some demystifying of demons. Fat cat. Okay, so the idea with this show that I'm working on is, I get into conversations with people about demons and things like that. I don't believe in them, right? And, don't believe in angels because it's all just manufactured from a written thing that someone wrote, right? The Bible and whatnot. But what I do find fascinating is that the majority of demons are pulled from sort of pagan religions that were before the Bible, right? And some of them did intersect, some of them just adopted them from religions that were kind of forgotten by the time they pulled them up. So what I decided to do is I'm going to go through the Ars Goetia, which is 72 demons, and I'm going to go through and explain the history of each demon, essentially demystifying them so that you're familiar with the fact that the majority of them are actually pagan deities, and the majority of them were good and they helped people. Well, you know what I mean. They were viewed as positive beings that helped people, and they got turned into demons when the Bible came up. So this can help assuage some fears about demons, hopefully, and help you understand that this stuff is just manufactured and changed over time by lore, rewriting, misinformation, etc. So I thought this might be fun. I'm hoping I can do this one a week. Then we have 72 weeks. And then there's other demons, and there's 72 angels too. But there's other demons as well that we might get into. But even just one a week, and a year is 56. So that's like a lot of content, right? So, but I'm really hoping that I can do this once a week for you guys. So we'll take it from here. All right. So our first demon, I'm going to go through the list of Ars Goetia. I actually have a list because I did a past video on the Ars Goetia, which I'll link to this. It's very long and it goes through the list of every demon. It's not super in depth. It just kind of explains each demon and their associated angel and whatnot. And it talks about the Ars Goetia and where the Ars Goetia is from, the history of it. So I'll link that for you guys. So I'm going through the list. So our first demon is Baal. But the thing about Baal is it's also a term for Lord, and this demon also is referred to as Baal or Baal-zebub or Beelzebub or Satan. Excuse any mispronunciations during this video. I did my best. If it's something that you want to yell at me about, go ahead, throw it in the comments. So essentially, there's a demon from the Ars Goetia, Baal, which is this was inspired by the Semitic deity Baal, and there's a biblical depiction of him as a demon, right? And I'll get into that a little bit. And then eventually, that's like Old Testament, right? Judaist kind of thing is when it showed up. And then when the New Testament came, essentially, then Beelzebub, he turned into that, and then eventually into Satan. So this demon, of course, we're starting off with one of the more complex ones. His history, it's very confusing. So what I've tried to do is put everything in concise as best as I can to explain this demon's background, where he's from, and explain that because he is transformed into many different beings. So we're going to run into ones that are kind of like this. And because this one literally leads to Satan, obviously he's got a very complex background. I will link some other materials, some references for you guys too, if you want to learn a little bit more about this. And I'll try to find some other YouTube videos as well. I know there's some that actually quote the scripture, and I'm going to try to not quote too much of that. Also, please bear with me on if I make any mistakes about scripture from Old Testament or whatever. Feel free to comment below and lay into me, whatever, because mistakes might be made with this one because this demon has such a complex and long history. All right. So I do apologize if there's any specific scripture stuff that's out of order, but I'm just going to try to do high level with this guy. All right. So let's get into it. So Baal was once one of the supreme deities of the ancient Canaan and Phoenicia, a powerful god whose influence spanned from the fertile fields of the Levant to the grand courts of Egyptian pharaohs. Archaeological evidence has traced his worship back to the second millennium BCE, and by around 1400 BCE, his cult had spread as far as Egypt. Even before these records, Baal held such a central importance in local religions that early laws and ritual prohibitions, such as those against certain sacrifices, may have been instituted as early as the time of God's law. Over the centuries, as cultures evolved and beliefs transformed, Baal's image shifted dramatically from a revered life-giving force to a figure synonymous with chaos and sin in later religious traditions. So I do find it fascinating that he ended up in ancient Egyptian culture as well. Okay, so I'm going to try to break him down into different areas. I'm going to try to organize this under different headings so you just get an idea of things like, for instance, the meaning of his name, where it started from, the mythology from the Near East, the Baal cycle and the mythic battles, the biblical narrative, and, the stuff leading into Beelzebub as well. So let's get into everything about Baal. Origins of the name. The name Baal actually means lord or owner in the ancient Northwest Semitic language. Originally, it functioned as an honorific title applied to a variety of local deities who governed aspects of daily life. However, it gradually became closely linked with the storm and fertility god Hadad, also known by names such as Adad or Iskur in Mesopotamian traditions. They believed that he could control rain, thunder, and warfare. In early Ugaritic texts, Baal appears as a mighty sky god, often depicted as a bull or a ram, symbols that underscore his strength, virility, and connection to the natural world. These depictions highlight his dual role, both as a bringer of life through nourishing rains and a force capable of unleashing destructive storms. As well, Baal is also referred in some texts as a sun god too, essentially like bringer of life. Over time, the title Baal expanded beyond its original meaning. In the Hebrew Bible, it's applied to various Levantine deities, though always with a tone of disapproval. These texts often depict Baal as a false god whose worship led to moral decay and divine punishment. Later in the development of the Abrahamic religions, the name evolved further, ultimately influencing the creation of the demonic figure known as Beelzebub. Mythology and worship in the ancient East. Before I get into the details of Baal and his rituals, just keep in mind that some of this stuff may have been completely made up or over exaggerated because a lot of it comes from texts from the Bible, the Old Testament, and whatever other texts like that to do with the one God, because they were trying to get people to shy away from pagan gods, and Baal was a pagan god, and he played a big role in them not being able to introduce the one God religion. So some of the stuff, like some of the sacrificial things and some of the rituals that they've done or that they said that they have done, just keep in mind that some of it may not actually be as extreme or even necessarily true, because they were trying to push this pagan god out and they were having trouble getting the people to stop worshiping and making up very crazy stories of propaganda about something tends to make people fall in line, because then other people start judging them and they just, society, peer pressure, and they'll just go with whatever makes their life easier in the end. In Canaanite mythology, Baal was celebrated as the supreme god of both Canaan and Phoenicia. According to these ancient traditions, he was the son of the chief god El, though some sources attribute his paternity to Dagon, and was closely associated with prominent goddesses such as Ashtoreth, Anat, Astarte, or Astarte. His mythic narrative is filled with dramatic episodes of cosmic conflict. He famously clashed with Yam, the chaotic god of the sea, and with Mot, the personification of death and the underworld. These mythological battles symbolize the eternal struggle between fertility and sterility, life and decay, order and chaos. In these conflicts, Baal emerged not only as a conqueror, but also as a guarantor of life, ensuring that the earth received the life-giving rains necessary for agriculture and the prosperity of civilization. Worship practices dedicated to Baal were as diverse as the regions that revered him. Different localities developed their own denominations of Baalism. For instance, Baal of Peor and Baal Berith, each with distinct rituals, iconography, and mythic interpretations. Temples and altars were constructed in his honor, and his cult sometimes engaged in extreme practices, including ritualistic sexual stuff, and in certain periods, human sacrifice, often involving firstborns. His priests were known to enter ecstatic states, shouting, dancing, and even self-inflicting things to induce a connection with the divine. Such intense practices reflected the deep-seated belief that Baal's favor was essential for ensuring a bountiful harvest and the continued prosperity of the community. Now, right here as well, in my research, I don't know that they were actually doing those extremes. It seems that the Abrahamic texts and stuff were accusing them of doing that and saying that people were following a false god and that this god is immoral because look what people are doing. But then other things I found were saying they weren't doing that. It was like a smear campaign for switching people over to a different religion, essentially. So I don't know how much of it's true. I don't know how much of it's a smear campaign. Just keep that in mind with these stories. A lot of them are in an effort to make another god look bad so that people choose the one god. In Mesopotamia, similar deities such as Adad or Askur shared many characteristics with Baal, Hadad, and over time, these traditions converged. At important cult centers like Baalbek in Phoenicia, Baal was worshipped alongside other deities, and his sacred bull became a potent symbol that underscored his association with both fertility and raw elemental power. The Baal cycle and his mythic battles. Much of what is known about Baal's ancient worship comes from the Baal cycle, a collection of epic texts discovered on tablets at Ugarit, modern-day Ras Shamra in Syria. This cycle of stories tells of Baal's rise to power and his struggles against older deities. In one account, Baal, armed with magical clubs crafted by the divine artisan Kothar wa Cassis, battles and defeats Yam, the god of the sea, and later subdues Mot, the god of death. Although some versions of the myth suggest that Baal experiences a cycle of death and rebirth, the underlying theme is not one of literal resurrection, but rather reassertion of his power as the supreme deity. This narrative mirrors a common motif in ancient mythology, the transfer of the divine authority from an older generation of gods to a younger one, more dynamic force. Similar patterns can also be seen in other cultures, such as Greek myths of Zeus overthrowing the Titans or the Hurrian tales of Teshub. As well, a lot of this, like them going, like dying and then coming back, the resurrection stuff, a lot of it mirrors the spring, fall, winter, like summer, like it's about the agricultural calendar. And that's what a lot of it kind of mirrors. I also found some stories as well of Baal being stuck in the underworld during the winter time, like not dying, but instead being stuck in the underworld and then coming back up in spring, which goes with, some ancient Greek myths as well, with the Hades, and I think it was Persephone off the top of my head. I might be misremembering, but it all again relates back to the agriculture and just the calendar and the season change, right, for crops. All right, let's get into some more about Baal and where he ended up. Baal in the biblical narrative. As monotheistic religions began to dominate the ancient Near East, the worship of Baal was increasingly viewed with suspicion and contempt. His cult infiltrated Jewish religious life during the period of the Judges and reached a notorious peak during the reign of King Ahab, whose Phoenician wife Jezebel fervently promoted his worship. The Hebrew Bible recounts numerous episodes in which the Israelites turned away from Yahweh, the one true God, in favor of Baal. These narratives portray Baal as a false god whose seductive promises ultimately lead to the downfall and scattering of nations. One of the most famous biblical episodes involving Baal is the dramatic confrontation on Mount Carmel, as recorded in 1 Kings 18. Here, the prophet Elijah challenges 450 prophets of Baal to a contest of divine power. While Baal's prophets invoked their silent deity all day, Elijah's prayer was answered by fire from heaven that consumed his sacrifice. This miraculous event not only led to the execution of Baal's prophets, but also served as a powerful demonstration of Yahweh's supremacy over the pagan deity. Further biblical references reveal that Baal's worship brought not only spiritual decay, but also political and social turmoil. For instance, after Hezekiah had purged Baal's shrines from the land, later generations would rebuild these altars only to suffer severe divine retribution and military defeat. The recurring pattern in these texts is clear. Reliance on Baal's power led to the Israelites away from their covenant with Yahweh, resulting in national calamities and loss of divine favor. I did find it interesting that it was this wife Jezebel that was involved in a lot of the stories. And, Jezebel becomes like a sort of insult, later on in human history. So I found that kind of interesting. All right, let's discuss when he transforms into Beelzebub. Transformation into the demonic. So Baal eventually gets transformed into the demonic figure Beelzebub that we all know. So let's talk about how he got there. Over time, as monotheism solidified in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the once revered deity Baal underwent a profound transformation. His name evolved into Beelzebub, also rendered as Baalzebub, Beelzebul, or Beelzebub, often translated as the Lord of Flies. In this new context, Beelzebub became the emblematic of demonic power. In Christian theology, he's commonly equated with Satan and is regarded as one of the chief demons or princes of hell. Beelzebub's demonic identity is further solidified by his association with deadly sins such as gluttony, envy, and pride. The New Testament makes several references to Beelzebub. For example, in Mark 3:22 and related passages in Matthew and Luke, the scribes accused Jesus of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebub. Jesus responded by arguing that a divided kingdom cannot stand, thereby underscoring that his power derived from God alone. Over time, translations like the Syriac version and the Latin Vulgate popularized the name Beelzebub, a form that would later appear in the King James Version of the Bible and become entrenched in Western religious thought. Medieval and modern occultists further elevated Beelzebub's status within the infernal hierarchy. Texts such as the Lesser Key of Solomon, the Pseudo-Monarchia Daemonum, and the Dictionary Infernal, or the Infernal Dictionary. They describe him as a formidable demon king. He's often depicted with the heads of a cat, a toad, and a human simultaneously. And he's credited with powers such as invisibility, control over vast legions of demons, ranging from a handful to as many as 66, depending on the source. These grimoires also associate him with various aspects of sin, sometimes linking him with gluttony or envy, and depict him as a central figure in the demonic order. Just going to add in a quote of Baal's reference in the Ars Goetia. The first principal spirit is a king ruling in the east, called Baal or Baal. He maketh thee go invisible. He ruleth over 66 legions of infernal spirits. He appeareth in diverse shapes, sometimes like a cat, sometimes like a toad, and sometimes like a man, and sometimes all these forms all at once. He speaketh hoarsely. This is his character, which is used to be worn as a layman before him, who calleth him forth, or else he will not do thee homage. Demonology and the occult legacy. Beyond his transformation in biblical literature, the figure of Beelzebub has had a lasting impact on demonology and occult traditions. In grimoires like Livre des Spirites and the grimoire of Pope Honorius, Beelzebub is portrayed as a king of demons who can grant invisibility, influence human affections, and impart knowledge of the sciences. Some texts even present him as a subordinate to other demonic figures, while others describe him as an independent and commanding presence in hell. In Kabbalistic traditions, he's sometimes associated with the Pleiaphot, the dark, impure realms that represent the opposite of the divine holiness. Additionally, if you're looking at the Ars Goetia, the figure of Baal is a demon mentioned in connection with Goetic demon Paimon, which we'll end up getting into this, but some people say that this is also related to Beelzebub. Although Baal appears only briefly in some grimoires and is usually linked with the Paimon's legions instead, the similarity in their names suggests a common origin of the ancient worship of Baal. However, also note there's often a female version of these demons when you go far enough back, so it could be a possibility that maybe this is a female version, but anyway, just a little side note. It's like I do discuss the demon Lilith in my video I did about the history of vampires. And Lilith actually originally was a demon before the Bible. The female version was Lili Tu, and the male version was Li Lu. So what they did is essentially if anything bad ever happened to a woman, then they blame it on the Lili Tu. If it happened bad to a man, then it would be the Li Lu. And then eventually they turned into like succubus and incubuses over time. So like there was often a female and a male version to a lot of these old demons, ones that sort of came from the Babylonian area. It's very fascinating, and it is in my history of vampires video, so I might pull it into their own video at some point because their history is really interesting of how they pretty much came to be. It's sort of like a birth of demons kind of, because they were around before all these texts were written. Ritual symbolism. I'm just editing the Baal video here, and I already did the Agares video. I realized in the Agares video I did provide information about the symbolism and the ritual behind invoking that demon. And that being said, I didn't really provide too much about that for Baal here. So I'm just going to quickly kind of go over a bit of it. I'm not teaching you how to invoke them. I'm just showing you some of the symbolism attached to them as well. We're just going to review that really quick. I do go into a little bit more about the Lesser Key of Solomon, and I show some of the diagrams and the symbols and the ritual stuff in my video, which I'm going to make a clip of my 2 Ars Goetia videos, and I'm going to combine them together, and I'm releasing it before the first in this demon demystifying series. So you'll see it pretty soon, but I will link it as well to this video. These ritualistic frameworks accompany the summoning of each of these demons in a very deliberate fashion. Every element from the specific dates and directions to the chosen symbols, the metal, color, incense, food, whatever might be at the altar, it all plays a vital role in ensuring that the practitioner can establish a stable connection with them. This is pretty much a set standard for all the Goetian demons because they have like a summoning ritual and action that's laid out in the Ars Goetia. So I'm just going to go over a few key notes about Baal. So the energies of Baal can be accessed more effectively during his designated dates, which is between March 20th and the 24th. Baal's direction that he holds reign over is the east. The alternate direction is the south. So you might face in those different directions or point in those different directions when doing a ritual. The numbers that people associate with Baal, I think that this came later. I don't know, because I'm seeing numbers like 6, 60, 66, 666, and 9. So I think people have just associated the mark of the beast with him. I didn't see that in the old Ars Goetia text about numbers. The planet that Baal is associated with, as well as the sun, because he is the life bringer onto the earth, and that even goes back into like Old Norse and Celtic beliefs, because I'm pagan from sort of that Celtic and Italian witchcraft I kind of follow. And the sun is the god because he fertilizes, right? And the sky and the rain and all that and the storms, and that's just like Baal. So it makes sense that the sun would be the planet for him. Alternate planets as well as Jupiter and Venus, and again that has to do with fertility and birth and so forth, right? Baal's preferred metals are gold, iron, and bronze. His element is fire, and back in the day when people worshipped him, there was actually a fire fire bowl underneath his statue, and people would do like sacrifices into the fire bowl. And a lot of people believe that that is where the idea of hell actually came from, because it was this big scary pagan thing with the fires. And then eventually, there's a whole separate thing with this, but eventually the fires too, they ended up like people were like being thrown in there, I think, as punishment at some point. I'd have to go back and check my notes, but the origins of why hell exists and like it being a land of fire and all that is actually linked back to some of this old pagan stuff. The alternate elements as well for Baal are earth, water, wind, and lightning, which he is a storm god and he does like fertilize the earth and everything, so that kind of makes sense. The zodiac sign that Baal is best summoned by is Aries. Alternate zodiacs as well would be Taurus and Capricorn. The preferred incense for Baal is frankincense, and Baal's preferred colors are yellow, black, red, and rainbows as well. And as well with all the Ars Goetia demons, there is a sigil, and you'd either, some people like draw it during the ritual, but then also it's good to have it like on a necklace, like have like a little pendulum thing, or like a ring or a breastplate or clothing or whatever. Like you have it on you already, because it's used to like call him forth and then order him to do what you want. So the sigil kind of like traps him in a way. So it's there to protect you, but also to call upon the correct demon as well during these rituals. So that is a little bit of information about the rituals and the symbolism during the rituals, because I'm going to try to add that to all these demon videos, because it is interesting, especially if you are someone who is pagan. This is very typical. We all have like rituals that are set up like this. There's different symbolisms, there's different incenses, metals, flowers, foods, colors, all of that. It all actually plays a role in anything that we do. Cultural impact and modern revival. The legacy of Baal and his demonic counterpart Beelzebub reflects a remarkable evolution across cultures and millennia. In ancient times, Baal was a vital life force, a god who controlled the elements and ensured the fertility of the land. He controlled the sun, the storms, everything. As monotheistic beliefs emerged, however, his image was recast to that as a false idol and a dangerous symbol of chaos. The Jewish literature mockingly refers to him as the Lord of the Flies, a name that derides idolatrous practices associated with his worship. In the Christian tradition, Beelzebub became synonymous with the devil, a chief demon wielding destructive power and opposing the one true God. His influence extended into literature and art, notably in the works like John Milton's Paradise Lost, where he's portrayed as one of the highest ranking fallen angels, second only to Satan. Such depictions cemented his place in the Western imagination as a symbol of vice and moral decay. And despite these negative portrayals, modern neo-pagan and some Wiccan movements have revived interest in the ancient deity. Some practitioners view Baal not as a demon, but as an embodiment of natural forces, representing the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. And they incorporate him into their rituals as a symbol of fertility, renewal, and the power of nature. This revival illustrates the enduring appeal of Baal's myth, demonstrating how ancient deities can be reinterpreted to suit the spiritual needs of contemporary society. So the story of Baal and his later transformation into Beelzebub encapsulates a fascinating journey through history. From a revered ancient god of rain, fertility, and warfare, to a demonized figure of emblematic chaos and sin. His evolution mirrors the broader cultural and religious shifts that have taken place in the ancient Near East and beyond. As Baal's image transitioned from a life-affirming deity to a symbol of adultery and evil, even in biblical narratives, his legacy continued to influence religious thought, art, and occult traditions for millennia. Today, the combined legacy of Baal and Beelzebub serves as a powerful reminder of how the same mythic figure can embody both creation and destruction. Whether seen as a vital force of nature in ancient times or as a demonic adversary in later religious texts, his enduring presence in our cultural and spiritual imagination underscores the complex interplay between faith, power, and the human need to explain the mysteries of the natural world. But tell me, what do you think? And if you enjoyed this little journey into history, I do love doing history videos, so I haven't done one for a while. But if you did enjoy it, hit like and don't forget to subscribe as well. And yeah, look forward to the next one that we're going to do, which our next one is Agares. That's the next demon that we're going to do. As well, I just want to thank our members and supporters of the channel. I really do appreciate it. It does mean a lot and does help the channel as well. But that is it for Demystifying Demons this episode. I look forward to seeing you in the next.